Hey there, kiddos. Last time we saw each other, I had just made my grand escape with my clone marine brethren and a few of our civilians to the landed ship to get the hell off this planet. But it looks like it's going to take an entire month for this bad boy to power up, so our little parlay is going to take a while. And in the meantime, we need to start prepping for more waves of enemies coming our way. Meanwhile, back at our old base that we had left behind, the entire place is crawling with assassin droids who are still tearing it into rubble as we speak. So, at the moment, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to go back and collect any of our previous winnings and rewards, at least in a peaceful manner. Which is an absolute crying shame, as we don't really have any resources here with us. We thought we'd be able to just hop on this ship and get the hell off the planet, and it looks like we have a wave of the Flood coming to attack us in about 5 days or so. It would seem that they are the first to detect that this ship is powering up, and then we will be leaving very soon. I suppose I should expect nothing less from ancient space zombies. Nevertheless, our work shall now begin. The first thing that we started doing was repairing our Goliath shuttle. This way, if we need to get out of here and fast, we can do so. Next up, we are going to be performing a little bit of deforestation. As you well know, wood is our most abundant resource here in the temperate forest, other than stone, but we don't have time to cut all that shit into blocks, so we are going to be building our new barracks out of wood. Only the most sweet and succulent of all timber. It is very bare bones and very basic, as one might imagine for the time being, as we're just starting out in this new area. But our clone marines didn't really mind anyhow. With that joy wire stuck in their brain, they were tickled plum pink about it. They just wanted a cozy little place to lay for a while. Something I've neglected to mention this entire time, though, is the fact that we have the option to show our location and or summon our enemies early here, and if we do so, we actually have a higher chance of getting another reward. Now, with this one taking 5 days, the chance is very low, around about 7%, but other times, summoning them early can actually give us chances up to 100%. The earlier the better, essentially. And even though this is an extremely low chance, I decided to summon them a bit early so we at least have a chance, and also so we can go ahead and get it out of the way. We had some Outlanders visiting us at the time, and shockingly, the Flood paid little to no attention to them, showing a devotion to solely trying to kill us, it would seem. Since they're so interested in fighting us, we would give them exactly what they wanted, a hellfire and fury of blaster power. Now then, with that, it's time for our first reward in the new area here, and we are going to be going with a chem fuel drop. The reason being, of course, is because we spent a lot of fuel to get here in our little lander, and so we are going to be refueling it for a trip all the way back to our old base eventually to get our other old rewards. This will save us the trouble of having to refine our own fuel right off the bat, but we still probably will eventually. And while we're still going about fixing up our lander, we're also going to be mining and deconstructing some rooms to acquire a lot of steel, and we are going to be packing the lander itself with all of said steel. Perhaps you think that this is for some sort of counterweight system or something like that, but you are dead wrong. This is actually going to be used for the bullets of our mini turrets atop the Goliath lander. We can actually use this as our defenses, though they do have to be manned. So it might actually be better if we're just still on foot using our blasters, as they are much more effective, but in theory, if we need to retreat to the Goliath, we can, and it can defend itself. Now then, it is time for us to summon early our second wave with a 64% chance at a fourth reward. Don't mind if I do. Second wave was easy peasy. It was the Flood again, and most of them were killed to a forest fire, although we did have some Forerunner Sentinels in the area as well, who ended up finishing off the last few. For our reward, we're going to go with a textile drop since we don't currently have any cloth or the leathers that we had at the old base, so we need something to make some sandbags out of, and I don't think that we really need any more people at the moment or really any of the other options as well. The leathers are great for sandbags as previously mentioned, but we don't currently have the resources either to go about making any turrets, so we went out and started mining for some components as well as steel once more so we can make those. Even so, the vast majority of the first few components and steel that we get are going to need to be used for some other quality of life things like, I don't know, say a kitchen stove so that we can actually cook our own meals, as we didn't really bring any of those with us either. Once again, a big fault on my part, of course. And we also needed, of course, for some power generation, like a solar panel, batteries, yada yada yada. I'm pretty sure that the ship generates its own power, but I didn't want to slow down the powering up process or anything like that. I think that it might be best, at least for right now, to have our own independent source. On a dark, stormy, and rainy night, yet another wave of flood would begin coming our way, and thankfully they wouldn't even make it close enough to think about infecting us. We finished off the infection forms and then went the carrier forms. Time for another reward. We didn't need any wood, obviously, being here in the forest. We have plenty of trees to cut down. We're also doing quite well with the current weapons that we already have at our disposal, so I ended up going with a normal random reward, which in turn ended up being a random prosthetic drop, so I guess that's better than nothing. One of them ended up being a joy wire, so that could be quite useful if we end up putting it on one of our civilians, of course, but we are going to need a proper room for surgeries first. We're also going to go ahead and summon our fourth wave early, as we have a 99% chance of getting a fourth reward. How can we not? For this wave, they would be coming in two separate groups, the first of which was coming from the southeast quadrant, and the second of which would be coming from the northwest, and the northwestern group would be easily defeated by Forerunner Sentinels. As for the southeast, our poor civilian Emma was having a mental break as we were fighting off the flood, and so she was at their mercy, easily and quickly infected. Unfortunately, by the time the rest of us came down to her aid, she had already turned into a fleshy biomass monster. I'm afraid that it is far too late, and the only thing we can do now, the humane thing to do, is to destroy her corpse to keep her from being reanimated once again, and keep her from suffering even further. Choosing our reward once more though, we are once again going to be going with fuel. This should be enough fuel for us to easily go back to our old base, and also to make it back home here in one piece. And because it's coming from a reward and we don't have to refine it ourselves, I think we might just be ready to go ahead and head out, exponentially speeding up our goals and processes. I thought for sure it would actually take us quite a few more days before the old Goliath was ready to fly again, but thanks to all the chem fuel and all the repairs and everything we've been doing, we are now going to be heading back to the old base to collect some of our belongings. High in the sky, ladies and gentlemen, above all of the poor outlanders who at some point are going to be assimilated into the flood hive mind, but maybe if we can get off this world and get back to our empire, we can come back and conquer them before that happens. For whatever reason, as we were flying back to the old base, we ended up having a choice in rewards. I ended up choosing some excellent armor to be dropped in, as I'd hoped to get some for any more civilians we end up taking on, but strangely, we never got this armor as a reward. I'm not sure if there was a glitch in between the two bases, because I think they have two different sets of waves, so I don't know what really happened there. Either way, though, we eventually made it back to the old stomping ground, and we had a bit of a hot landing, you could say. We immediately burst out of the Goliath and started firing upon any mechanical menace that we spotted. Ah, finally, home sweet home, just how we remember it, eh, Shin? well, not quite as we remember it, I suppose. All of our structures, we didn't build them, we stole them from the Outlanders, but you know what I mean, they're completely destroyed. Luckily, it does seem that we still have a lot of our resources, like our riches, like silver and gold, which is absolutely perfect. First things first, we would end up preparing the Goliath itself to prep it for the flight back home, and if for some reason we got yet another massive wave of enemies while we're here, which probably will happen, we'll have a quick getaway in case we don't get all the resources, but we still need to go. Other than that though, it was simply just us loading up all the silver, the leathers, the steel, the components, anything and everything that we found to be quite useful back into the Goliath. But even massive marauding clone space marines have to take a little snooze every now and then, so while our two heroes here catch up on their rest, let's check back in on the others. It would appear that Hiroshi is enjoying some of the televised programs that the Outlanders put on this planet. I suppose we should enjoy what little comforts we can we have yet another wave of the flood coming to kill us. This wave was mostly comprised of infection forms and hound forms, and though the hound forms are quite quick, it really didn't matter as we had some great range and we would easily put this wave down. Our reward this time around, we ended up choosing a good armor drop to help us suffice with the fact that we didn't get the excellent one earlier I was telling you about while we were flying, unfortunately. We would end up getting some good helmets and shoulder pads of a space marine, and we ended up giving these to Rosalina, the beautiful lady who came in her stunning attire last episode, the only current living civilian that we have. Hopefully this armor will help keep her alive. Our ship base is safe and sound now, but meanwhile back at the old base, Shin and Rinbin were about to be taking on the largest rate of flood that we have ever encountered. It would appear that these fleshy monstrosities were about to create a massive hive in the area rooting into the ground. Realistically, that was the least of our concerns as several infection, hound, and other forms were coming right for us. We were about to be completely and utterly overwhelmed. Our only option would be to rush to the inside of the Goliath, but with only two of us, we wouldn't be able to man the turrets to defend ourselves. Forced to retreat like this, we were completely out of options as well, and after a few minutes, we were surrounded on all sides. With literally no other option at our disposal, we would have to leave the area. Well, we may not have been able to shoot at them from inside the Goliath or even able to kill all of them, but we were able to burn a lot of them with the engines. I hope that really, really hurts you little bastards. It's a shame that we had to make a preemptive getaway as we hope to stay in the area for a lot longer and to load up even more of the previously owned items of ourselves, but we ended up making it back to the ship with a good bit of silver, gold, mostly riches, although there was some steel and components in there as well, so better than nothing for sure. But I'm afraid it's time for us to call it quits on the old base. The flood hive is already getting to be very large, and it's going to cause everything to move a lot slower on our currently loaded map since we're going to have both of them loaded at the same time. Goodbye, old friend. Not to worry though, as we are going to be turning this new temporary base around the ship into a home sweet home. And of course, to go about doing so, we're going to need quite the storage facility, especially given all the new resources we just brought back with us. Our next wave would also end up coming, and once again, it was the Clankers, who actually were fighting with the Forerunner Sentinels, which I found to be quite interesting, given that they're both different types of mechanical creatures, but whatever. The Sentinels ended up dying to them, unfortunately, and we would have to step in to take matters into our own hands. Our reward, we would end up choosing a resource drop, and I know we just went back to the old base and got quite a few resources, but we would actually end up getting a lot of wood, saving us time cutting down trees. Not that that was a big deal, but we ended up also getting advanced components as well as plasteel, two things that we definitely did not have at the old base. We started to really dig our heels into into the ground here around the ship to ensure that any enemies that would continue coming our way would have absolutely no chance of rooting us out and making us flee this area. This ship is our endgame, quite literally, and we do not plan on leaving. As we were making upgrades and constructing around the base, we ended up having Rosalina, who late one evening told us goodbye, and she said it's time for her to move on. Now, luckily, she didn't die. This is one of the rare occasions where a civilian has not died under our watchful eye, but it is still a bit disheartening that she was willing to leave so soon, although we do wish her well, of course. With that, for the time being, our entire crew is consisting of nothing but our clone marine brethren, meaning that we can really go full balls to the wall during these fights now. The only casualties to worry about are the ones we'll be inflicting upon our enemies. I also finally wisened up as well and connected the rest of the power grid at the base here up with the ship itself. I think the ship generates about 1,000 watts of power, so it's really a foolish move not to do that, and we could have done that all along. I'm sure some of you were pretty pissed off at me earlier in the video when I said I wasn't going to. Sorry. But we didn't just split our power grid into the ship's own so that we could power a few lights around the base. No. We had something much better in mind. We were going to start building some large turrets around each side of the base to protect our perimeters 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Before we could finish constructing our first turret though, we had yet another wave of flood coming right for us, mostly once again consisting of infection and carrier forms. We weren't all that worried. Perhaps it was a mistake to underestimate them though, as many of them didn't even come for our marines and they actually went to attack the ship itself. As we came to try to stop them from stopping us from leaving the world, we ended up doing some pretty bad damage to it, also destroying the sensors and a cryo sleep casket. A fire had sparked and we would have to take our attention away from our enemies for a little bit here to go about putting that out before the whole damn thing caught up in a blaze and exploded. But once we did that and the flames were extinguished, it was time for us to focus on the remaining infection forms. We killed them, no biggie, we're done. As for our reward, since we don't have any humans, or really just any civilians in general, I suppose, we would end up choosing to have a xeno-human go about joining us. That way we can take somebody off planet with us when we do end up leaving. We should try to take as many survivors as we can with us, as it's the humane thing to do. We ended up having Starry here, who I believe is a genie. She apparently had a psychic harmonizer inside of her brain, which means that if we keep her happy at all times, everyone's going to be feeling pretty darn great, so that's good for our morale. We need to ensure that her fleshy little body isn't turned into the corrupted biomass of the flood or blasted into bits by the droids, so we sent her in to equip some armor and weapons. And sticking with that, we finally would end up finishing our autocannon in the northern section of the base, covered with some steel embrasures as well as leather sandbags to protect it, and we would also end up finishing yet another one down in the southern section of the base, covering a significant portion of the perimeter all around us. And because no doubt the waves that have yet to come are going to be quite chaotic with a shit ton of enemies, no doubt, we went all around our base destroying any wreckage and anything like that we could, so they wouldn't have anywhere to take cover from us. We would also expend some of our resources to go ahead and rebuild the ship's sensors. We can now resume the launching process. We wouldn't have been able to go anywhere without these bad boys, so it's a good thing we got it fixed. Finally, the nice little cherry on top for our current defenses was going to be a steel armored wall tomb all around our ship, not totally encompassing it, but encompassing it pretty well enough to keep it from being damaged. Speaking of, yet another wave of droids would come our way, mostly B1 battle droids, but also some super heavy androidicas as well, attempting their best shot at gunning us down in broad daylight with the pouring rain, but thankfully, because we got rid of any wreckage that they could hide behind, it wouldn't take us long at all to end up defeating them as we took cover behind our embrasures and turrets. Our reward, though I was interested in getting yet another colonist at this point, another civilian to add on to our ranks, I ended up going with some resources like my components once more, as I think that they're going to be more useful at this time. We would end up expending these components on some new production areas, new to this base but old for this series, as it's just a machining table, and finally a biofuel refining area as well, so we can start making our own chem fuel. That way we don't have to worry about constantly trying to get them from waves as a reward. After refining some chem fuel, the Goliath was ready for yet another voyage into the sky. This time around though, we're not actually traveling for any resource collection or fighting, we're actually going to be doing some trading with Outlanders. Reason being, we had come out to purchase some reinforced barrels for all of our mortar needs, as well as some components, as you can see after we returned home, as we thought that we could stockpile them. We always need components, alright? With the reinforced barrels that we purchased though, we would create ourselves yet another hexagonal mortar. Unlike the previous one that we had stolen when we took over the Outlander base, this one seems to be automated, though it can be manned as well, which is quite useful, I would think. We went ahead and started producing ourselves some high explosive shells. This seems to be our go-to default shell here recently in the last few episodes. Eventually we might start trying to make some EMP shells, though even if we were to hit the droids with them, we would have to have a team out there to fight them, so it's going to take some coordination. We also had our swarm turret atop the Goliath, which required us to fuel it with chem fuel, and now that we're refining our own, not only could we keep the Goliath fueled for travel, but also for defense. Similar to the turrets though, we do have to man it. Unfortunately, it is not automated, though it, and more importantly, our mortars would be absolutely perfect for this next wave, which is solely made up of the flood, primarily infection forms, and the carrier forms, yada yada. You're used to this by now, I'm sure. Since they were preparing in their little group, we started firing our mortar at them, and it was more than effective, I would say. The only issue is hitting those carriers makes them pop, and then we end up not being able to blow up the infection forms because we wasted all our shells on the carrier, but I digress. What remained of them would come running straight at us head on, and with our blasters and our newly formed turrets, we would easily end up defeating them. Although a small group of the infection forms had creeped around the backside of the base trying to sneak up on us, they would end up getting a hefty dose of the old swarm turret, baby. Wash it all down with a few blaster bolts and we are golden, pony boy. As for our reward, we would end up choosing a mini turret drop, as these were going to be absolutely useful for fighting off these smaller infection forms. I've said this multiple times, you're probably well aware, sorry. They will be great for closing up these small gaps in the perimeter that our autocannons cannot hit, of course. We do need to build some proper steel embrasures for them and what have you though. But my friends, I'm afraid that will have to wait until next time for our final episode, or what we hope to be the final episode, assuming the ship isn't destroyed. I was hoping that we'd be able to finish this up this episode and get ourselves the hell off this floating rock, but it looks like the ship still has about 5 or so days before it's fully powered up and ready for launch. So yeah, we're gonna put it off for now and split these up. Next wave is sure to be interesting though, as it is wave 10, meaning it's going to be a double trouble wave as well, it would appear. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully we survive, of course. Here's the thing though, we don't have all that many colonists, and yet we have a lot of seats with the cryo sleep pods on this ship, and as previously mentioned, it feels like it wouldn't be very humane for us to just leave all the civilians being offered up to us behind. So I'm thinking we might start summoning raids early once again next episode, and even if we don't, or if we do, whatever, we might start trying to take in a lot of civilians, as many as possible, so we can try to rescue them. Let me know what you think about that though. Either way, next episode is sure to be huge, so don't miss it. I'll see you later. Bye.